Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. So where we're going to be picking up is on page 83. And I also just realized that a lot of people are going to a convention in Tennessee, and that's probably where they're going. Candace knows she's going to be there. Woo! That's probably where they are. I just had that moment mid-prayer where I'm like, I think people are traveling to Tennessee. And then step 10, that's just around the corner. That's the only 10 I see. See what I did there? I didn't plan for that pun, and you guys can tell I didn't plan for it. Alrighty, but where we're picking up is on page 83. And where we left off was we must remember that 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. And so we're picking up on the third full paragraph. There may be some wrongs we can never fully right. And just to sort of contextualize where we're at in the book, especially those that are just joining us for the first time, welcome. We are in steps 8 and 9. And what we spoke about over the last couple weeks, because it takes me a while, somebody goes on tangents. I'm the somebody, but it takes us a while to get through it. But we were talking about steps 8 and 9. And we spoke about a practical, functional way of setting up our 8-step lists. And we spoke about many ways in which we can grow and build our willingness. And we saw in this part of Into Action how steps 8 and 9 are intertwined. We saw various prayers to build our willingness. And we spoke of, hey, you agreed at the beginning you'd go to any length. So, just take that leap of faith, put the bit in your teeth and go to it. And we spoke about consulting with others and other ways to prepare for the 9th step. We also spoke about a very practical way in which we make amends, where we reach out to them, make the approach, where we are specific about our defects of character and the harms that we caused, where we ask if there's any other way in which we harmed others and ask what we can do to make it right. So that's what we're talking about. And then Into Action, we look at very specifically different types of amends. And I always want to emphasize, if it's in the book, it's applicable, which is to say, if we are feeling called out by some of these types of amends, it is because that's what happens to us. So the first one is if we owe money. So we spoke about what we can do if we have financial amends. Then we spoke about what do we do if we've, not you guys, you are all law abiding, but what do we do if we've broken the law? Like, how do we make those crimes right? Then we spoke about relationships, specifically what to do about infidelity. And then how do we repair our relationships even if there isn't infidelity? More specifically romantic, but that close family ties. And so what we're talking about right now is a category of how do we make amends in situations where we might not be able to make that direct amends. So that's where we're picking up. I thought context would be helpful. Y'all can let me know if it is or it isn't. Alrighty. Welcome. So glad you just joined us. We're on page 83, third full paragraph. It says, there may be some wrongs we can never fully right. And here's the direction. It says, we don't worry about them. If we can honestly say to ourselves, we would right them if we could. So if we can look at what is going on in our heart and we can say, you know what, if I had a way, if I had an opportunity, I would make it right. Welcome, page 83, third full paragraph. All right. And it says, some people cannot be seen. We send them an honest letter. And I just want to talk about in 2025, what are some modern examples of amends that maybe we can't fully make? Or in 2025, what are some examples of where we might have to do writing a letter or an equivalent, right? So some examples, and often these are amends that come to mind. One of the first ones that comes to mind for a lot of people is, how do I make amends to somebody who has passed away? And if we owe an amends to somebody who has passed away, we can make that. And I've helped people navigate that type of amends. And if you guys know, I'm a big believer, if it is on my heart then more often than not, I'm trying to be gentle. I'm like, almost always, y'all, but more often than not, I've got to take action. I don't know why I'm y'all heavy today. I often use the expression y'all because I love it. It's very purposeful, but I think it's just because I mentioned a lot of people are in Tennessee and then it just infiltrated my brain. But how do I make amends if somebody has passed away? What do I do? Well, there's a number of approaches we can take. So the first approach, and probably the most common, is writing that letter. And as you guys know, I'm big on writing out the amends beforehand anyway, so it's good spiritual action. And then what we can do is what is known as a gravesite amends. So we can go to that person's gravesite and read that letter to that person. If they are not buried, but maybe had their ashes scattered somewhere, or maybe we don't know where their grave might be, we can go to a place that was symbolic of who they were or the relationship that we had with them. And we can sit down there and read out that amends. And for some people, and actually for many people, that can be a profound experience. There can be real healing and real freedom that comes from that. But for some of us, it still kind of nags. It still kind of lingers. And again, I'm big, if it's on my heart, it's on my heart. I got to get free of it, you know? And so another course of action that we can take is to be direct in setting right the wrong. So let's say I stole money from somebody who's passed away, and maybe I can't find any living relative to give it back to. I can find a charity or an organization that really exemplified who that person was, what they cared about, what they loved, and I can give that money to them. Or again, if I'm still feeling like, man, maybe it wasn't financial, maybe it was something else. Well, man, if the person I owe amends to loved dogs, why don't I spend time at the local SPCA? Why don't I spend time, helping elderly people in my community walk their dogs? Like, why don't I do something in honor of them? And actually, I'm talking about these types of amends, but, one of the things we don't often talk a lot about in AA is grief. And one of the things is when we're like, ugh, and it's not because we're special in AA. It's because most human beings are like, oh, that's a lot of uncomfy feelings. I'd like to avoid that. That's what happens. And I'll just share, I've done some of my own grief work. I've gone through grief in my life. I'm not an expert, but one of the things that can be really helpful is if we're feeling grief on our heart. If we think of that person that we miss and that we love, and we think about what made them special, what did we love about them, and then being intentional about bringing that into the world, bringing more and more of that into the world, and that allows that person to exist in that real intangible way. So that can be also a helpful way of processing grief. And there's value in that, and there's power in that. And because oftentimes as an not even as an alcoholic, as a human being, I just want to avoid grief. I want to avoid amends. You guys remember when we were talking about those amends, when people will be like, that's fine, you just keep doing what we're doing. And I'm like, give me amends. I don't got to do anything. But no, the tangible action I need to take is to continue to live this way of life. And so with some of these amends where I can't fully make it right because they've passed on, or maybe I genuinely could not find that person, and it's on my heart, I found it helpful for myself and working with others to take that sort of action. So that's something we can do. Now, the third example, in a situation like this, that's right, I got more. And annoyingly, I've got experience with amends, which I know is nobody's favorite piece of information. It's like, yikes. But when we talk about this type of an amends, there's also something that's known as a surrogate amends. And if you've not had any experience with it, it's where we find somebody who sort of resembles that person. Like, let's say we owe an amends to maybe our grandmother, and our grandmother has passed on, and we feel it on our heart. And, we find that, matronly, old timer in the meeting who just reminds you of your grandmother, maybe just the warmth. And it's often helpful to find a surrogate who's also in AA, because they know what we're doing and it makes sense. And it's somebody that can receive and perhaps respond to, and perhaps that way to really move through that amends process. And I've actually helped facilitate a number of those surrogate amends. And it can be helpful if you've caused harm to like a nebulous group of people that you're like, I can't find 36 one-night stands. Do you know what I mean? But we can find somebody who sort of resembles that, or somebody who's a stand-in for that, and have that experience. And that can be incredibly healing. And there's been a lot of places where I've helped. I'm kind of dancing around it, but I'll be honest. There have been times I've worked with people who felt that they owed amends, and it became clear they owed amends to people who worked in the sex industry, the sex trade. And I've sponsored people who obviously worked in that sort of industry. And that ability for one person to make an amends to another person, it is just, even it's not direct. That person never hurt that person. But it is incredible the healing that can happen when I just get out of the way and I take willing, surrendered actions, especially ones that seem stupid and awkward, and I don't want to do it, Paige. That's where God, annoyingly, that's where God seems to move, is in the ones that I don't want to do. So those are some examples of how we can make amends if it's not possible to make those direct amends for whatever reason, like they've passed on, or it's somebody that we genuinely couldn't find again. Although annoyingly, I will throw out, I'm real good. I'm real good at finding people. So if you were like, I don't know if I can find someone, I'm good at finding them. So you just let me have a turn. I know. No one's like, I don't want a turn. No, thank you, Paige. No. All right. So it says, and there may be a valid, so some people cannot be seen and we send them an honest letter. And there may be a valid reason for postponement in some cases. And there's times where there's tact and that sort of thing. Often we assume there is valid reason for postponement. Do you know what I mean? We'll be like, it's allergy season. I can't possibly make an amends. You know what I mean? I'm like, it's a valid, in the middle of March Madness? Oh, no, I couldn't possibly bother them in the middle of March Madness, I'm looking for things and I will find. Let's run that valid reason for postponement by our sponsor or some trusted pillars, just gonna throw that out there. You can make amends during March Madness or during allergy season. It's possible. I know it's May. I know we're 2 months out of that, but still, it was on my brain. All right, so, but we don't delay if it can be avoided. More often than not, it can be avoided. And also to speak about the honest letter. I know a lot of people, and I used to come from that school of you make your amends eyeball to eyeball, face to face. And I spoke about this a couple weeks ago. And then there was that period of time where some people were very comfortable being in person, and that period of time where other people were not comfortable being in person. And when we're approaching amends during that time, it's I just learned, why don't I ask them what they would like? You know what I mean? It's such a wild concept, communicating for an amends and asking them what would be best for them, what they would like. You know what I mean? Crazy. But there have been times, let's say I owe an amends, and I happen to owe an amends to somebody who moved to Australia. And it was one of those, oh man, now to be fair, it's not, oh man, it's oh boy, Australia. I will let you know that's a little out of budget for somebody like me. And fortunately, in my case, she came back to Calgary where I live for a visit, and I was able to make an amends. But let's say I owe an amends to somebody who lives thousands of miles away, and it is cost prohibitive for me to go and make that amends. Well, I can reach out and see if they'd be open to a video call. I can reach out and see if they'd be open to a phone call. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to let that distance prevent me from making an amends. I'm a big believer in action, almost as though this chapter is called Into Action. It's big on that one, which is rude, and momentum. The more I take action, the more I build momentum, the more freedom that I get. And if I make an amends imperfectly over the phone or imperfectly over a video call, well, maybe I can then save up the money to go in person to continue that amends and do it again in person. Do you know what I mean? But if I don't make the amends, it just lingers. So I'm real big on, let's just go do it. Let's just go do it, And then people be like, but Paige, it's March Madness season. You know what we can do? I'm really leaning on that. I don't know why. But Paige, it's March Madness. And here's my sponsor suggestion, which is reach out and say, I want to acknowledge that it is March Madness. And I know you might be very busy. I just want to see if you'd be open to receiving an amends. If it would be better to meet in May, I'm more than happy to accommodate that as well. You know what I mean? It's communication. I'm not making fun of anyone when I say what a wild concept. I'm pointing out that was something that baffled me as a human being my entire life. You mean I could just communicate what's going on and see what might work for them? Truly, I need a way of life, a program of living, and the spirit of the universe to come into my life to be like, hey, would it be possible to book a time? Do you know what I mean? That's how I am. So it says, but we don't delay if it could be avoided. We should be, and this is how we are called to show up to amends: sensible, tactful, considerate, and humble. So we're going to use our common sense. We're going to use tact. And common sense and tact can be summarized in that, I'm going to be considerate of them and thoughtful of them. And it talks about considerate, humble. So we're showing up shoulder to shoulder. I'm not showing up, I'm better than you. I'm not showing up, I'm worse than you. And it says, without being servile or scraping. We're not, bowing down. We're not crawling. We're saying, here I am, and here are the mistakes that I made. Please let me know what I can do to make it right. That's how we're showing up. And it says, as God's people. And this ties back into that 7th step. There is a power here that wants a relationship with me, not in spite of the things that I've done, but will meet me in the mess and the shame that I bring to Alcoholics Anonymous and will take me where I need to go. God's people. I'm God's people. That is powerful. We are God's people. We stand on our feet. We don't crawl before anyone. And now what we're going to dive into is what is often known as the promises. But to be a little bit pedantic, I'm like, they are the 9th step promises, because we got promises all over this bad boy. We got promises for days. Ooh, there's so many promises. And I don't even know if the 9th step ones are the fanciest. I think there's fancier ones, I'm not gonna disparage the 9th step promises, because that's a little scandalous, and I still need you to like me. But we're gonna have a look at some of these promises, 9th step ones. So, if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, so let's break this down. If I am painstaking, which means if I am actively going about and doing my best to make my amends, and that this phase of our development is very specifically making amends, going and making amends, it says we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We read this at many, many, many meetings. It's a lot of people's favorites. But still, does anyone think halfway through the amends process I'm going to be amazed? Before I've made my amends, I don't think that's happening. It's like in the 5th step promises. I don't think the result of a 5th step is going to be delighted. Are you out of your mind? Making amends, I'm going to be amazed. No, Paige, you don't understand. my deceased grandmother is going to call the police on me and SWAT's going to come. Like, I think it's the worst possible case scenario every single time. I'm going to make an amends to my dog and my dog's going to reject me. You know what I mean? Like, that's how bad it's plausible with a cat. I'm just teasing. But like, that's how I think this thing is going to go. But the truth is, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. But the key is that I've got to do this work. Halfway through my amends, I've got to be diligent. And again, when we're speaking about how do I build willingness, some of you guys are familiar with a tactic that I have with my sponsees, and some of you are going to be absolutely mortified, and I understand why. What I'll do is I'll say with my sponsees, pick 10. 10. Pick 10 people. Yeah, some of you are intimately familiar with this nightmare. Pick 10 people and we're going to reach out to them right now. And then we're in the middle of it. And we're in the middle of it. Too late. Can't be scared now. Well, you can be. You're allowed to be scared. We get to do things scared all the time. Yeah, God works in that. It's all good. But we're in the middle of it. And we're moving. And I know nobody here ever knows what it's like to get stalled out in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. No one here could possibly relate to this concept. But there are some places we get stalled out. The first place is step 4, because I'm afraid of step 5. And the second is right here, step 9, because I'm afraid. And what I've found is momentum can overcome fear. Action can overcome fear. Consistency can and will and does overcome fear. So if I take the action, man, it flows. It flows. And actually, I don't normally talk about this at this point, but I got some people in the middle. Welcome. We're on the bottom of page 83. I got some sponsees, some grand sponsees, and a great-grand sponsee, actually, that are in the middle of an amender. So we got an amends competition. You know what I mean? It's 2 versus 2. It's a tag team championship, a race to 10 amends. And I'm like, yeah, I do that. Yeah. And I make little fight posters. Everyone's got their fight nicknames. It's a thing. Yeah. So if you are struggling with amends at the moment and you're like, I am competitive, come, we'll throw you in an amender. Absolutely. Also, if you're like, I'm not competitive, but you're a little codependent, come, we'll throw you in an amender on a team because you don't want to let your teammate down. We'll do anything to leverage that amends. Oh yeah, I have a lot of fun with amends. My sponsees might have different opinions on the process, but I have a lot of fun helping them through it. But it says, so we will be amazed before we're halfway through. To get these results, we have to take the action. That's what I'm really trying to emphasize. I have to make the amends to get the results of the 9th step promises. They don't come from meetings. They don't come from step 6, like halfway through the 12 steps. They come from being diligent in this way of life, in these 9th steps, making our amends. So it says, we are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. You know those things in your gut that gives you the twisties and the resisties? That's the stuff we got to amend. You know that you think about that person and you want to, you wish there were more mailboxes you could hide behind in case you see them. You know what I mean? When that is done, it's done. There's a freedom. There's a real freedom on the other side of this. And a happiness. Again, I don't think the results of amends is going to be happiness. I think you've lost your mind. But that's true. That is what happens. It says we will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. And the reason I don't regret the past, the reason I don't want to shut the door on it is because I've cleaned it up. And we're going to talk about this when we get into the family afterward. We have taken our dark past and we have converted it into assets. We have taken the shame and the guilt and we've turned it into something that is better than gold that we can use to help another human being. And it happens in amends. It says, we will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. And we're not talking about just reading it out of a 1930s dictionary. I do have my dictionary, but we are talking about an experiential understanding of serenity and peace. Really knowing what that is like in here, not in my head, but in my heart. We get to experience that. It says, no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. No matter how low we've gone, the harms that we've caused others, we take this course of action. Again, everything that caused me shame is now something I get to use. I get to use to help another human being. Man, this is a powerful process. I'm terrified of it, but it is powerful if I can just get in there and get it done. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. It's gone. It's gone. And I'm gonna point something out when we're done reading this. It says, we will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. So in step 3, I was wrapped up and I was in the bondage of self. And here at step 9, I now get to experience freedom. I'm free from that bondage of self. I just realized I got another thing I got to screen share. So I'm bringing that up now because I forgot about it until this moment. I'm always prepared. All right. It says, we will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. And I want to point out, this is something that's happening organically. Of course, at first, it's like, fine, I'll care about other people if I have to. But then it becomes organic. And then you start finding yourself, you know what I mean? You fall in love with the people in your life. You know that cranky newcomer, falling in love with that cranky newcomer. You know that crazy uncle or that crazy, you know what I mean? Falling in love with these people. I don't mean in a romantic sense. I mean in the love that we get to experience. It says self-seeking will slip away. Thank goodness, because I was seeking self all over the place and I wasn't getting any relief from it. It wasn't working. And it says our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. So the way in which I show up and I see the world around me changes. And then it says fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. That doesn't mean people and economic insecurity will leave us. That promise only happens if I move away on a mountaintop and live in a hermitage or something. But the fear of people, the fear of economic insecurity, and that fear of people leaves as I go and I squarely face my wrongs and make them right. Because if I can do that, man, you judging me, you not liking me, you rejecting me, man, that's got nothing. I'm experiencing my value and worth coming from God, a higher power. And fear of economic insecurity leaving us, that happens as I squarely face the amends, the financial amends, and I go and I try to make that right. It says we will intuitively, which I'll be honest, not much happened intuitively for me before I got here, intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. And for me, so often that is like basic communication. Just like, hey, here's what's going on for me. How's that sound? You know, wild. Hey, I'm stuck in traffic. It's looking like I might be 15 minutes late. I would be dying in traffic, like, oh no, what do I do? Baffled, you know, but intuitively. You know that feeling when you know you've done something wrong? But now we have a way to make it right, and we don't have to carry that guilt with us day in, day out, like I used to. Man. And it says, we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. God, I promise, I know when you're like, girl, amends is a lot of work. But I promise God is really doing the heavy lifting. If you know what it's like to show up to an amends and have that whole relationship do a complete 180, or if you know what it is like to show up to an amends, have them slam the proverbial door in your face and still know that you are okay. I'm doing some work, but God is doing the heavy lifting. And one of the things, I got more screen shares than I thought I did. What I'm going to share with you guys is something that we spoke about in step 2. And what we spoke about in step 2 was the parallels between the 9th step promises and what is found on page 52, which are the bedevilments. I'm just going to zoom it in for people, and I'm going to boop-a-doop. All right, so we got the boop-a-doop is how the technology works, if you're wondering. That's what my degree is in. You got to make the sound effect, otherwise it doesn't do it. All right, so we got the 9th step promises versus the bedevilments. On page 83, it talks about we are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. Well, in the bedevilments on page 52, and the bedevilments are a beautiful description of what it is like to live life, having that conscious sense of separateness from God, to live life in that spiritual malady, not limited to alcoholics. But that is what we treat in Alcoholics Anonymous. That is the purpose of the 12 steps, to take us from on page 52, we were unhappy, to what we see on 83, we are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. When it says we will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it, that's paralleled with what we used to be like, where we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. On page 83 and 84, it says, we will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. Now on page 52, I couldn't control my emotional natures. It says, no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. And again, on page 52, it spoke about how we couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. Well, on page 52, that's all we had was that feeling of uselessness. When it says we will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows, self-seeking will slip away. Well, on page 52, when I'm stuck in self, before I've taken these actions, I was having trouble with my personal relationships, which makes sense. I was operating from pain and living in pain and harming you and causing pain, and I didn't know how to make it right. It goes on to say our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. And on page 52, we were a prey to misery and depression. Man, that's not our experience today. It says fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. Well, on page 52, I couldn't make a living. When it says we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. Well, on page 52, we were full of fear. And if I'm full of fear, I'm baffled by everything. And so that, and I have it set up so it's bedevilments in the order of the bedevilments and the 9th step promises and the 9th step promises. And what I'll do is I'll make sure I share these images in the WhatsApp chat after the big book study. So that's one parallel of the 9th step promises. But there's another that I want to share with you. Whoops, if it'll work. Nope, there we go. It just got a little frozen. Let's see if it'll work. No, that didn't do it. Hold on. Too many buttons. There we go. Oh, and I'm in the way when I do this. Oh, no. Alrighty, hold on. And I got to move this bad boy over. Hold on. Seamless transition. This is a diagram that my friend, I'm out of the way. My friend Glenn made. And by the way, Glenn is just the most wonderful person. I love him the most. And it's a silky chart. No, it's a sync. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a chart that contrasts the 3rd step promises and the 9th step promises. So for those of us who were with us when we were on step 3, we were talking about how the 3rd step promises do not happen at step 3. They happen as I go out from step 3 and I take this course of action. And on the right-hand side, we see the 9th step promises we're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. And we see that ties into us being reborn. When it says we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us, it speaks about how we could face life successfully. Again, when we suddenly realized that God was doing for us what we could not do for ourselves, again, that reborn. And we see that again when it talks about our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. When it talks about comprehending the word serenity, knowing peace, and that fear leaving us, it ties in with step 3 where it says the step 3 promises where we begin to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. When it talks about how we can use our experience to benefit others, that losing interest in selfish things and that self-seeking will slip away, it talks about how more and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. Now, these 3rd step promises and the 9th step promises have these beautiful parallels. Because the third step is ultimately a decision to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. That's what the third step is. And it makes sense that if I take this course of action, especially 4 through 9, I will begin to experience those things. I speak a lot about how the engine of Alcoholics Anonymous is 4 through 9. That is the motor. That is what gives us motion. That is the vehicle that takes me from hopelessness to hope. There's some work I got to do once I'm at that hope, once I'm at these 9th step promises. But that is the vehicle that gets me there. And so I just wanted to point out that interesting parallel and share with you a little graph that I made the first one. I didn't make the second one. Glenn gets all the credit for number 2. And again, I will share all of that with you I'll share it in the chat at the meeting chat, the Zoom chat. And I'll share it with you in the WhatsApp chat. But I can't do all of that all by myself all at once. So just bear with me. I can barely do words out of my face all at once. You know, some of you are like, yeah, that's accurate. Alrighty. So God is doing for us that which we could not do for ourselves. And man, that's the experience. God does for me that which I could not do for myself. And what could I never do for myself? Permanent, contented sobriety. I could never do that by myself, and so much more. There is so much that is available here in Alcoholics Anonymous, so much more than just don't drink. Just don't take that first drink. Because I can't do that. There's more here than just I'm sober today. There is a deep and powerful and profound and a healing and a wonderful way of life. A deep and profound solution to the problems that I bring. Problems, not just the problem of alcoholism, but I got to take the action to get it. Now, when we're in a meeting, what happens is the person reading the 9th step promises will say, are these extravagant promises? And then we all chant, we think not. But when I'm at an in-person meeting and I'm sitting next to a friend, sometimes I like to lean over and be like, yeah, they're pretty extravagant. Yes, that's extravagant. I mean, I was not a member of the Dry Pants Club. You know what I mean? I was vomiting at the spiritual proposition at 2 a.m. This idea of freedom from the bondage of self, this idea that like I can show up to life in a brand new way, that's pretty extravagant. But we think not. And the reason we can say we think it's not that extravagant. This is not pomp and circumstances. This is not woo-woo. This is not airy-fairy. This is practical. The reason we can say we think not is because they are being fulfilled among us. Because that is our experience. I did Howard, you guys, many of you know Howard. He invited me to cover his study one time, and he's like, you can do anything you want except do not like cover what I'm going to cover. And I was like, oh, I can do anything. And so I did a big book bounce around, and the topic of that was ineffable mcschmeffable. And I said that he had to figure out how to spell it. He just titled it Big Book Bounce Around. But these promises, ineffable means to be experienced, to be understood. Mcschmeffable is just a word that I made up that rhymes. And I was like, Howard, you better spell mcschmeffable right. Don't get that one wrong. That's important. God bless him. The patience that man has putting up with my shenanigans. He's like, the big book bounce around is what we'll call it. But ineffable means to be experienced, to be understood. And none of these promises are ideas. They are not beliefs. They are not theories. They are experiences. And on Friday, I do a big book study on Fridays with my friend Terry, and we talk about, I stole this from Terry, who I'm pretty sure stole this from Babe, but this book is a book of mirrors. And what I want to do is I want to hold up my experience to this book. And I want to see, especially in step 1, is this me? Is this me? Do I drink like that? Do I have the obsession like that? Do I feel like that? Is this me? But now what I want to do, this is still a book of mirrors. The mirrors do not stop once I get into the work. The mirrors are just as vibrant in the promises. I want to hold this mirror up to my lived experience. have I made at least half of my amends? And continuing, not getting stalled out, am I in the middle of making and actively making my amends? If so, is this my experience? Is this my experience? Hold the mirror up. Now, if this is not my experience and I'm not making amends, that is why. Yes. We get these promises with action. And these promises are ineffable. They are about experience. And it says sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. Now, we often like to harp on, I guess I'm a sometimes slowly. I was talking about this at an earlier meeting. Forgive me for those of you who are at the first Big Book study. But not once in my life was I sipping my drink. Do you know what I mean? I didn't set a drink on the table and let the ice, it didn't, more often than not, there wasn't a glass. I was not drinking with ice. No. But I wasn't, you know what I mean? I didn't have a glass of alcohol and have the ice melt so you have the water on top. I didn't leave any in the bottom unless it had cigarette butts in it and I drank it by accident. You know what I mean? I wasn't leaving any undone. And you see, how often do I do that in Alcoholics Anonymous? I start sipping my Alcoholics Anonymous and I'm like, why am I not getting the effect? And I talk about this, man, I've got to go after these steps the way I went after a drink. I got to go after my amends the way I went after that next drink. And I know it's not as pleasant at first, but I'm going to get the same effect. I promise. The effect that we get from diligently making the amends, especially the ones we don't want to make, is the same effect that I would find at the bottom of a bottle of beer or a bottle of alcohol. That's what I'm after, the effect, and I've got to go after it to get it. There's nothing worse than, when you're hanging out with people, especially when you're sober, because you're actually noticing these things, and they are sipping their drinks and they're taking their time. They leave half the drink when they're done. You know what I mean? We notice and we get annoyed. What are you doing? It's the worst. And they don't get the effect that we get from alcohol. And if I want the effect produced by Alcoholics Anonymous, I can't leave any in the glass. I can't sip it. I've got to go after it. Hey, it's so good to see you. It's been a while. Welcome. Oh, that's lovely. Sorry. Attention span of a gnat. I'm happy to see all of you, by the way. I don't have favorites. Everyone's going to be jealous. No, I didn't mean it like that. I love all of you equally. Alrighty. And it says, so we want to get attached to that sometimes slowly. But what I need to focus on is they will always materialize if we work for them. Not if I think about it, not if I talk about it, not if I do 90 meetings in 90 days. 90 meetings, 90 days, not a bad option, not a bad thing to do, but it is not going to give me this effect. It is not going to keep me sober. I've got to go after this. And so it says they will always materialize if we work for them. I've got to work for them. How do I work for them? I send out approach messages. I show up I make my amends. We can get through the amends quickly, which is way better than taking my time with it. Sipping amends sucks. Chug that bad boy. You know what I mean? Do a keg stand with your amends. Go do that. You can make your amends right side up. You don't got to do it upside down. But you know what I mean? Go after it. So it says they will always materialize if we work for them. This thought. Now, the thought is the idea that these promises come true and alive if I am diligent in this action. So this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests. Now, I will point out it is simply a suggestion, but we don't have alternatives. You know what I mean? It's it's only a suggested. But the only other option for alcoholics is an alcoholic death. So we don't have a sugar-free option. You know what I mean? We don't have Diet Coke. We don't got it's this. But nobody's going to make me do it. So which suggests we continue to take personal inventory. Continue. I'm going to stop at the word continue and speak about that word continue. You know what's annoying? In step 10, it said we continued. And it said continued when I got here, before I was even doing anything to continue. And then at like a year in, 2 years in, 3 years in, said continue. Said continue at 5 years in. 10 years in, I checked it again, said continue. 15 years in, look what it says, continue. Guess what I have to do? Continue. To be fair, I did set that up. I wasn't expecting anyone to be like, I don't know. The answer was pretty apparent. But I got to continue. This is a way of life. So where it says continue to take personal inventory. Well, where did I learn to take personal inventory? Step 4. Step 4, absolutely. And it is that process that I learned in step 4. It's not a thing that I did over there, and that would be nice. It is how I continue to live my life. And then it says, and continue. Oh man, I got to keep doing this too. Set right any new mistakes as we go along. Well, where did I learn to set right my mistakes? Just right there, step 9. So step 10 is a continuation of 4 through 9, that main engine that propels me into the realm of the Spirit. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but it is a continuation of that process. And some of you guys know that I have that metaphor of inventory as that house cleaning, with the newspapers and the cats and the empty bottles and cans, that? And you see, what happens is I do that big house cleaning. But if I clean that house, that big house cleaning, that's great. But if I stop after that, my house is going to get dirty again. And I'll give you guys a practical example. I have a little garbage can right on the floor there. And because much of my day is spent with sponsees and doing things like big book studies, I have to talk a lot. And because I do a lot of talking, by the way, when I first got here, you couldn't get me to say, even I'm Paige, I'm an alcoholic. They'd be like, would you like to share? And I'd say, no, thank you. Sometimes I would just shake my head. Now you can't get me to shut up. But what happens is because I talk so much, I often have to have throat lozenges in. And so I'll pop in a Halls. And I really should move the garbage can a little bit closer. But what happens is I'll be working with somebody, or I'll be midway in the big book study, and what I'll do is I'll pop in a Halls and I'll toss the wrapper at the garbage can. And sometimes I make it, and I quietly feel very good about that. I'm like, well, Kobe, woo, or LeBron, or whoever is the Caitlin Clark, whoever is your basketball person, Jordan, I don't know. But I hit Steph Curry, boom, sorry, I just felt like I was ignoring some, and some people would be upset. I'm sure none of you are like, I don't care about, okay, we got one person that's like, I know cares about basketball, but other people probably not. All right. And so some of them I miss. And so what do I have to do? Well, eventually, not as often as maybe I should, but I got to pick them up and clean them up. And if I just leave them there, they're going to stay there. And it's a little like, the 10th step is a little like what happens if I were to spill my tea in the mornings. In that moment, I want to clean it up. I don't want to wait for the end of the day. And so it allows me to keep my house clean in the here and now. And when we get to step 11, we're going to talk about the evening review process. Now, the evening review process is a little like, for me, picking up the Halls wrappers. It's something that I do at the end of the night. When I'm done, I don't bother midway through appointments, but it's that picking up the Halls wrappers. So any garbage that I miss during the day, I pick up at the end of the night. And this process, 4 through 9, is, again, the vehicle that's going to move us in step 10. And we're going to see it moving in the 11th step as well. So it says, continue to set right any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously, that means with some effort, some enthusiasm, some action. Man, I had to do it. Like, I went after it vigorously. Commence this way of living. Oh, and so you guys know, like, way of life, way of living. I emphasize, let's highlight, let's underline. Way of life. This thing is a way of life. This is not a set it and forget it deal. I've got to do this thing on a daily basis to continue to live in this world of the Spirit. So it says, We vigorously commenced, and to commence is to begin this way of living as we cleaned up the past. So we begun. It's not a end date. It's not set it and forget it. It is how we live our lives. It's not something that I talk about in between the prayers of the meeting. It is how we live our lives outside of the prayers of the meeting. It says we have entered the world of the Spirit, capital S. And it is 4 through 9 that takes us to the world of the Spirit. I made it! Sorry, if you were like not expecting that. I just popped in a holes. And that one I got. I would have told you if I missed it. I would have been like, gonna have to clean that up there later. I was trying to do it seamlessly. I got distracted by me doing a thing. I wasn't distracted by anyone else. Ooh, attention span of a gnat. All right, so it says, we have entered the world of the Spirit, capital S. And so what happens is 4 through 9 brings us into the fourth dimension. It brings us to that spiritual awakening. That's what's happening. That's where we're trying to go. The world of the Spirit. We're awakening. And it says our next function, function, that is a job responsibility. You guys remember in step 3 when I got my pink slip or my spiritual P45 for those in the UK that stayed up real late? So glad you're here. Thank you. But I got my pink slip, fired from management position in my life because my life was unmanageable. I managed it. I took my life and I managed it into an unmanageable position. I got fired. And then I was given a new responsibility. I worked for this power. And what that looks like is I work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it. And the first job responsibility that I got was house cleaning, step 4. And then I got that house cleaned, and then I'm like, oh, look at all these defects. Can I do defect removal? And it's like, girl, you are not in defect removal. That is upper management. You're in the willingness department. And I'm like, all right. So I do my 6 and 7. I'm all about willing. I'm all about asking. And I go to step 8 and I'm like, do I get a spiritual promotion? And it's like, no, you're still in willingness. Keep doing that. Be willing to make these amends. And I go and I make these amends. And now I'll throw it out there. We could say we get a little bit of a spiritual promotion. You guys in for that? Some of you are like, no, that sounds like more responsibility. But spiritual promotion, it'll come with the spiritual pay raise. I'm just throwing it out this way. If you're like, girl, I'm not here for this, that's also completely reasonable. But our next function, this is our spiritual raise or a spiritual promotion, is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. To grow. The first thing I want to share is that often we talk about steps 10 and 11 as maintenance steps, and that's not wrong. That's not wrong. They absolutely are maintenance steps. But if I don't have a vehicle, but I can tell you that there's nothing less interesting than getting an oil change or putting on your winter tires, or rotating the tire. Like, I have zero interest in that. Maintenance does not sound fun, but I promise you, if our next function is to grow, based on that and also based on our experience, steps 10 and 11 allow us to grow. These are not simply growth steps, but they are also not simply maintenance steps, but they are also growth steps. We got to grow, and that's way more exciting. So instead of just changing the oil, we got to put some nitrous in that bad boy. You know what I mean? That was my car noise. Vroom, vroom. It's been a long day. It's not as bad as last week, but it's been a long day. All right. So when it says our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness, what we're growing in understanding of and effectiveness in is God's will for us. That's what we're growing in. Growing in understanding of God's will and effectiveness in carrying that out. We get to be an agent for God in all areas of our life. It says, this is, and I'm going to phrase it like this. Oh boy, that sounds like a lot of work. I hope it's an overnight matter. This is not an overnight matter. Oh no, I hope it won't continue for too long. It should continue for our lifetime. So again, this is not something that I do for a period of time. or that I set and I forget, or I talk about in the meetings. This is how we live our life. Now, Vivian isn't here, but in respect of her, we're at time, and it's actually, I know we're in the middle of a paragraph, but it's actually the perfect place to leave off. Because next week when we dive in, we'll be diving in with the first direction of step 10, which is continue to watch. And we'll be breaking down the mechanics of how we actually do the 10th step. So I hope, no pressure, I hope you'll continue to join us. And I'll do a little, I said no pressure, but I want to do a little peer pressure. I hear it's what all the cool kids do. So I'm just kidding. Thank you guys so much. What I'll do is I'll stop the recording and I'll set it so that we can unmute. 1 second.